Hey, I'm Gillett, and this is the Power of Women podcast. We're a platform that showcases and celebrates the strength, resilience, and achievements of women from all walks of life. In each episode, I pose questions to my guests to peel away the layers to reveal the knowledge and experience that shapes their narrative. So if you're feeling unseen or unheard or simply looking for inspiration, then the Power of Women podcast is a great place to join the conversation. If you're enjoying the podcast, make sure you follow it, like and subscribe so we can keep bringing this free content to you. Today's guest, she's an Olympian. She became a member of the Order of Australia in 2015. She's a champion of boardroom governance. Margot Foster, welcome to the Power of Women podcast.
Thank you, Di.
Margot, where did you grow up?
In E8, as it then was, Camberwell.
What did you call it?
E8.
What was that the reference to?
That was the postcode in the olden days.
Is that right?
Yes, before we had 3124 for Camberwell.
Oh, showing our age. But
yes,
I don't remember that.
I don't know why I remember it, but I also remember my phone number from way back then too. So
I think I remember
all those little things.
I remember the number plate of my parents' first car.
Yes.
So that's
it fits into that category of remembrances.
Of ridiculous things. So what was the most powerful learning from your childhood?
I think, and it's only when you get older that you can reflect on your childhood properly. And I guess I've been doing that a bit more recently as both my parents are now dead. And I think it was the trust that my parents put in me almost from the get-go that allowed me to pretty much do what I wanted, and within reason, of course. But I wasn't a rebellious child, so I might have been difficult, but not rebellious. And that set me up for what I've been able to do since.
Fantastic. You're one of how many siblings?
3.
3. And where do you sit?
I'm the oldest.
The oldest. So hence the responsibility piece. Yeah. So, Margot, let's start with sport. And there have been a few champions in the Foster family, have there not?
Yes. My father was a dual Olympian, played water polo in 1952 and 1956.
Melbourne Olympics.
Yes, Melbourne Olympics, and made the front page of the Sun. He was a doctor, and he treated one of the injured Hungarian water polo players during the feisty, fiery blood in the water clash between Hungary and Russia, which was all very tense and difficult.
What was that, blood noses or gouged flesh?
Oh, gouged faces and a lot of activity goes on in water polo, let us say, under the water.
Under the water,
under the water. And it was just after the invasion of Hungary by Russia.
It was political.
Yeah, a lot of geopolitics happening at that time. And so, I grew up with Dad as a Olympian father. He'd also been a champion, junior schoolboy tennis champion, and a high jumper. So Dad came with a lot.
He did.
And,
good genes.
Yeah, so I guess we were all sort of expected in a way to be as good as we could be at whatever we did. But we also had a lot of opportunity to be involved in sport.
And your brother was an Olympian as well?
Yes, my brother was a 1988 kayak Olympian in the K2 1000.
And that's been a great sport for this Paris Games last month.
Certainly for the Fox family, yes.
Yeah, incredible. That's really incredible.
Except my brother was flat water, not of the type that Jess excels in.
I'm intrigued by that. So that the one that the Fox girls have done so well in, that's a man-made rapids style course. Is it always on a man-made course at the Olympics?
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
It's quite a strange phenomenon, really.
Well, it's interesting. They drain the course every day.
Is that right?
Yes, and then they reset the...
Maybe if they'd done that with the scene, they wouldn't have a coli outbreak, yeah?
But they reset all the blocks in the course to create
different water patterns.
Yes, so that you can't, paddle one day
and know how to play it the next day.
Yeah, the next day. So I thought, oh, that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
So completely different
there
from the
you
flat
go.
water.
So when did you realise you had the potential to be an elite athlete?
Well, I was, growing up with a father who's an Olympian, although he never really talked about it, a bit like, not talking about the war. But it was always sort of present. And I guess, I was a good swimmer when I was younger, and I thought maybe that would be my sport. But as it turned out, it wasn't. Timing-wise, commitment-wise, school-wise, all those sorts of things. And I've been always a competitive person. And then I was at university doing law arts and living at Trinity College at Melbourne Uni, and they had intercollegiate women's rowing had started a couple of years before I went there. And in third year, I was what I describe as dragooned into having a crack at the rowing, which I'd otherwise fiercely resisted.
I only made it as a Trinity coxswain, so
did you?
a few years after you. Yeah,
but it's good fun.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was when you got into it.
Well, yes, and as I said, I wasn't a sport that I knew anything about, and I had pretty much zero interest in. I'd gone down to the head of the river as one does when one's at school, and and watched it at Geelong. But other than that, and when I was at Trinity, I'd gone to watch the rowing, but I had no interest in it. But finally, I relented. Went down one morning in March, I think it was.
Be bright and early.
Yeah, bright and early enough. And, rest is history.
So what's the proudest achievement in your sporting lineup?
Well, I think, obviously an Olympic medal is the proudest achievement, or it's the best achievement. And, certainly watching... the Olympics year on year since then, I realise how fortunate I was to have been in that time and that place and be able to cross that line third, because not everyone gets that opportunity. But I must say, though, that when we did cross the line, and we were at Los Angeles and we were in America, the officials in the initial speedboat came round and told us we were fourth. So I know exactly what it's like to finish fourth. And let me tell you, third is much better.
Yeah, being on the podium. Yeah. So looking back, what do you consider the biggest life lesson from your sporting career?
I think I was very fortunate, and I say fortunate compared to probably a lot of athletes now, is that I got into rowing when I was, how old was I? I think I was probably third year, I was 19.
Yeah.
And by the time I hit the big time, which I describe as getting into my first Victorian rowing team, I had finished my studies and I was doing my articles, as they then were, for my, practice law. And
what an interesting time to wrap it into your sporting world. That
yes,
that would have taken some time management.
Well, I guess that's what I'm getting to. It's sort of time management. Because I was living at home then. After college, I went and lived home, so I could, which was convenient.
Yep.
Didn't really want to live in a share house at that stage. And so I did my articles. And then circumstances were such that I started my own legal practice the next year. So not only was I starting my own legal practice, doing a lot of criminal law, I was also rowing. So I managed to do both.
So your day was starting about 5 and finishing at what time?
Well, it was time management. So I'd go down to the river in the morning.
Yeah.
We didn't start that early.
Okay.
We started about 6:30.
I must have had a really tough coach. Because we did. Well, it felt like it was 5. Maybe it wasn't.
Oh, I did early in Canberra for a couple of stints, but in another campaign.
Yeah.
So I'd go down to the river in the morning. In those days, we could leave our cars parked there, so then I'd get changed, walk into town,
turn through the Dorchester into the boat sheds. Yeah.
Walk into town, grab myself a coffee, and work during the day. Then at sort of 5:30 or 5 or so, I'd walk back down to the river and go rowing, and then go home. So time management was something that
was pretty good.
I managed to do. And what it did teach me was that to focus on what I was doing when I was doing it. So when I was working, I was working. I wasn't really thinking about rowing. And when I was rowing, I was thinking about rowing and not working.
Yeah.
And I think that ability to compartmentalise has stood me in good stead. And it's also taught me that I pretty much get everything I need to get done. And I don't worry about what I'm not doing when I'm doing something else.
Yep.
So I guess those are the lessons, and certainly time management. I'm
Focus,
yeah, and never late.
Yeah.
Because you can't be late if you've got a whole lot of other people waiting on you to get the boat on the water.
It comes from being in a team. You've got a responsibility.
I always remember I had friends who, they knew I rowed, but I don't think they really understood what that meant. And they'd say, oh, just come away for the weekend, come down to...
Yeah, they don't understand the responsibility of team.
No.
Yeah.
I said, it's not
Isn't
like
that
a footy
interesting?
team.
Yeah.
You could get by with a footy team with 17 people, but you can't get by
There's
with...
kind of one person missing out of the seat of a boat's a little more obvious.
Not at all.
Yeah, there you go. So we're all captivated by the Paris Olympic Games, and being the Power Women podcast, we can't not talk about the brilliant results our females have had. Grace Brown in cycling, Jess Fox, 2 golds in kayaking, and her sister as well now. Molly O'Callaghan, gold in the pool. Carly McEwen created history with gold. Ariane Titmus. And then the one that I think brought us all to tears was, and I have to read it because otherwise I won't pronounce it correctly, Saya Sakakibara in the BMX racing. That was just so... tugging at the heartstrings.
It was.
You're an Olympian. Has the Paris Games captured your imagination?
They have. And I just wish I was there. I thought about going and then I didn't, and now I wish I had. But I think what's been lovely has been the enormous crowds and seemingly no problems, or certainly none that we've heard about. Everybody is going to the Olympics, having a good time, cheering. The volume of the cheering has just been extraordinary. Yeah. And it reminds me of the London Olympics, when there was a huge amount of goodwill, lots of people out and about. They did have some similar problems with the weather too. I remember sitting watching the equestrian events in London, freezing cold. Rain was pouring down, but no, I think the vibe has been fantastic.
And that inter support from country to country of competing athletes seems to have been far more genuine and heartfelt than I can remember seeing in years. Yes,
and I think it's probably a reaction to function of the distance that everybody had to keep in Tokyo.
Yeah.
I think it's been great, and the visuals have been sensational as well.
Amazing. And Phil Liggett said something that was really, really interesting. He'd said that the French have learnt from Tour de France of how to showcase France.
Yes.
And when you think about the shots in the street with the cycling and the road races and the like, just the backdrop of the buildings and the streetscapes has just been unbelievable.
It is. It's terrific. But I think drone technology's helped us a lot as well.
Yeah.
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 Certainly a new innovation, I think, since
in documentary making and everything, it's elevated.
Yeah, it does. It makes such a difference.
So can we talk about leadership? Because I do believe there's a strong correlation between being an elite athlete and being a leader in business. I've certainly used that as a measuring stick in my search world of leadership traits. Do you agree with that?
Yes, but it's not everybody. Oh, you're probably more tuned to it than I, as you've been focusing on it in your recruitment work. But a lot of athletes are encouraged to get into leadership positions because they've been successful athletes. Some make it and some don't. But I certainly think it's an attribute. And it's played out for a lot of women in the US. I did read a report, I think last year, about the number of women who had been either very good college athletes or Olympians, or certainly representatives, and they had a huge amount of success as leaders,
that's
as
interesting.
a cohort, because they bring this, the ability to work in a team a lot of the time, the focus on the task, ability to make decisions, operate under pressure. And I think that they're all the things that you learn as a team, as an elite athlete, certainly at the pointy end, because it's all pressure.
Yeah.
It's all pressure,
And that actually plays to the point I was going to say, that list of females that I read out a moment ago in our Australian athletes from the Paris Games. If we cast our mind forward, and I know it's crystal ball stuff, but I can imagine there could be some great professional pursuits in front of those individuals once they move from the sporting arena into the business world, in whatever business is, for all of those reasons.
If they think and they've got the opportunities to look at themselves in that way too, I think that's important. It's one thing to have an athlete persona, as another to turn yourself into something else, which is what I was saying about being lucky before. As I said, that when my rowing career came to an end not of my choosing, a whole other story, I already had a career, so I didn't have to work out what I was going to do next.
Yes, because there are those who, once you take off, and we've seen it over and over again, perhaps in the swimming world, of stepping out of that world that's incredibly structured to then having to manage your own time and your own future instead of it being to a script.
Yes.
Taking those guide rails off can be detrimental for some.
Yes, I think so. But it's also increasingly, and I think it's probably fairly universal now, that athletes train 3 times a day. And if you're training 3 times a day, you don't have much time to do anything else other than eat, sleep, get ready for the next training session. So I do hope that a lot of the athletes, successful men and women, but women in particular, do get the opportunities to think about what else they might do. And I know that they're all encouraged to do courses, etc. But, when your main focus is on that day in that pool in 4 years' time, having 2 goals can be sometimes a bit challenging.
Yet in your era, you also would have been focusing on fundraising because there wasn't the same funding coming through, I guess, to get yourselves to the world events, or was that not such an issue? I remember from my own family's experience, it used to be, there were some very colourful fundraising stories of names that will not be mentioned on air. But
Well, no, luckily, I mean, my first international regatta was the Olympics.
Okay.
So I
hadn't done a Worlds.
I hadn't done anything.
Right.
So I was sort of thrust into it in that sense. So that was all funded. And in 1985, we had to do some fundraising and had a fabulous party at Kooyong, which was very successful. And then in 1986 for the Commonwealth Games, again, that was funded. So I was quite lucky, again, in not having to rely on too many people.
You don't have all those stories of people who shouldn't be in the room at gaming events, climbing out windows when there's a police raid.
I was
you were there
for that one.
Infamous, that one.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
I did climb out a window.
Could have ended a few careers in the legal world, but we digress.
We do.
So coming up, we're going to open the doors of the boardroom and take a look inside. So, Margot, sport has featured prominently in your professional career, How has your network and reputation from your sports career benefited your business endeavours, or in fact has it?
It's a hard one because I don't know that it's benefited business per se. Maybe it has.
Is there a club being an OLY? I mean, once an Olympian, you're always an Olympian. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I suppose it's the attachment of that knowledge to me that I am an Olympian, and that gives me a profile and that I otherwise might not have. And I don't know that I could make a direct correlation between I guess it makes a difference.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a bit like, you know, school networks and college. You're at Trinity college networks. It can be the most subtle way of opening a door that might not have otherwise opened to you.
Yes, and I find that I'm well known because I'm an Olympian, because I practiced law for a long time, because I've been involved in sport. On various boards over the years, like lots and lots of sports boards, and from the local to, you know, the state, national, international. So all those sorts of things have given me a profile, I suppose. And it's a combination of all that I do and all that I've done. And being an Olympian is probably a really important part of it. But to dissect it is into the component parts is just too hard.
So what do you think are the traits that you've taken, and we've talked about some of those disciplines, but what are the traits that you've taken from your elite sporting career into your professional life that you still use today?
Oh, look, I think it's all about the discipline, the focus, the teamwork. Although, you know, to be an elite athlete, you're often described as being an A-type person. So fitting
Not all are, though, are they?
No. And fitting that sort of, and I was the stroke of all the crews that
Well, that's probably A-type.
all the crews that I rode in. So yes, that's probably a bit A-typey. And so balancing, learning how to balance your natural tendencies against the good of the team, the good of the organisation, the best interests, all those sorts of things. I was a lawyer and I'm a detail person, so, you know, that helps with the board work and business work that I do.
There's been a few rowers over the years who've been lawyers.
Lots.
It lends itself to that, clearly. I can think of many, and you say there's lots.
Yes,
so.
Yeah, lots and lots.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's just circumstance or whether there's something about being a lawyer and I've never actually drawn the link between being a lawyer and being a rower. It's just that there has been
a lot of the rowing folk come through a private school path because it is a private school sport. But putting that aside.
Yes. Well, look, I mean, practically speaking, if you're doing law at uni and you're rowing at uni, it's quite a good combo because, you know, the number of hours.
Hours are generous, law or arts.
And I remember in final year law, I think I had 8 hours a week of, lectures. So that allows, whereas if you're doing medicine,
exactly.
It's so much harder. And I do admire any elite athlete, any Olympian who is also doing medicine. And
were there any in your years? I can't think of any doing.
There are always people, you know, at the boat club who were doing medicine. And there was one.
But you're right. It didn't lend itself quite so.
So in our Olympic team in 1984, we had one medical student.
Okay.
And in the 2012 London men's crew, there was a medical student. Mackenzie Little, who's the...
I remember that name.
She's a javelin this time.
Yep.
She's a doctor.
Yep.
You know, balancing her training. So there are a few of them. But certainly as a student who's rowing, doing law is easier.
Yeah, get it. So How important is mental toughness in business, and how does it compare to the mental fortitude that it takes to compete in elite sport? Is it a similar trait?
Oh, look, I can comparing it with rowing. So rowing, you've got to row 2,000 metres, and 2,000 metres is always 2,000 metres too far. It always hurts. It hurts, from the start. So you have to get to the end. So there's that mental and physical toughness, and it's really about trying to train your brain to endure the pain, particularly in those last strokes. And as we've seen from this Olympic regatta, some athletes have a much higher threshold for pain and their mental ability to deal with
push
that pain.
Through it.
Yeah, and I wouldn't think that and certainly not in my experience, is any of the pain of being in business or doing business equivalent to that. But nonetheless,
however, if business is going bad and you've got everything on the line, I imagine it's got some correlation in terms of steeling yourself for what's to come.
Yes, for sure. And luckily I haven't had to put myself in that position. So, but certainly if I think about business people who are going through all sorts of, business page of the newspaper reporting, there would be a lot to withstand and endure.
Yeah. So you're the founder of the Boardroom School, and one of your services focuses on boardroom excellence, which I gather is all around governance and all of those positive aspects of boardroom behaviour. We've spoken before today's podcast, and I was going to ask you about women in the boardroom and not the statistics, because we know what the statistics are. There have been plenty of conversation around that, but rather the focus around traits and behaviour. And you've got some clear views around that, because I was of the view there may be different traits and behaviours between the men and the women, but I know you've got a very clear view on that, Margot.
I think that men and women, as we know, come at problems and solutions differently, have different sensibilities about certain matters, and that's why having men and women at the board table is always valuable, because of the different ways of thinking and approaching matters. But the boardroom, as I see it, is one of the most equal places in the world. Everyone has one voice, and when it comes down to it, one vote.
Equal once you're in, not equal to get there.
Certainly once you're in, getting there all sorts of influences, some better than others, to getting there. But certainly once you're there, your job is to have a voice, have a say, have an opinion, and put it fearlessly and frankly, obviously courteously and politely, and stand up for what you think is the right thing to do, always bearing in mind the best interests of the organisation. And you don't have to agree, you can disagree, but ultimately it's coming together at the end to agree on a decision or an outcome that is in the best interests.
That's interesting, because you say it is the most equal place, but we know that so many boards are made up of old guard, whether that be because they're known quantity and they've been invited on to board after board after board. We know that search firms are often briefed to look at the market to bring in fresh talent, but the desire is not for that fresh new talent. So we keep seeing the same faces over and over again. With that old guard, and I'm going to talk about middle to older age white men, do they truly behave in the boardroom that it is equal when it comes to gender, or is there differing behaviour that's not quite so in keeping with corporate governance?
I can only talk about me, and in all the boards that I've been on, I have never felt that I was being treated differently. And I've never felt that the behaviour has been all about them. And I've been the only woman on lots of boards.
Okay.
So I don't know whether it's something about me and my expectation, because I had never thought of myself as the only woman on a board. Ever.
And most female board members that I speak to will say the same thing, because they're there for a job and for their expertise. Why would you think of yourself being there as the gender appointment?
Yes.
And if in fact you thought it was only about that, you probably wouldn't accept the appointment.
No. And if you did, then you'd keep it to yourself, I think. So no, I and it's interesting when joining as the only woman, and one of the board that I'm on at the moment, I was when I first joined, and rather the opposite, that it's this sort of excessive degree of politeness.
That's annoying. Well, can be annoying.
It's yes, and it's interesting in itself. So you just have to say, no, look, it's fine. I don't mind what you say. Just run the meeting as you normally would, and I can roll with anything. It doesn't matter what you say, whatever. And no,
We've heard bad language before, guys.
Well, that's right, and. Not that this particular board had a proclivity or a habit of being loud and raucous and arguing with each other. Not at all. But it's I don't know. I've never seen bad behaviour. Maybe I've just been lucky.
Or maybe clearly you've put out a vibe that it's not tolerated. So.
Could be.
Yeah. So do you think we're going in the right direction to getting greater representation of females on boards?
Yes, certainly.
I said we weren't going to talk stats, but here we are.
Well, I was going to say that the Victorian government announced in 2017, I think it was, that I'm talking about sports boards here.
Okay.
That all Victorian state sporting associations, like Swimming Victoria or, Tennis Victoria, whatever, had to have 40% women on their boards by the 1st of July 2019. So that has certainly encouraged a lot of women to join boards, and obviously they're getting opportunities that they mightn't otherwise have. I couldn't say that there's been, I don't know whether that's made a difference to the governance. I mean, it's probably too early to tell. It's only, 4 years, 5 years, and by the time you get board turnover. Yeah, and there's plenty of women who are putting their hands up and wanting to be on boards and doing board training and learning about governance and things like that. So there's certainly an appetite amongst women. And going back to what you said before about, the groups of men particularly, I guess, who cleave to the old ways. And in a way, I'm not sort of excusing it, but can understand in a way that people like to work with people that they know and trust and who are like them. And
I get that, but the whole idea of a board is to have a contest of ideas.
Yes.
So you've just killed that.
Yes, yeah. Well, you do, but it was certainly interesting. I was at a lunch in Queensland a couple of weeks ago, and it was the host. Again, it was a sport-related conversation, but was saying that most Australian sports boards have a requirement of 2 independent directors. So you can appoint. This is where you get the opportunity to appoint women. And he made the remark that the boards aren't appointing people because they want to keep their, close little.
So they're not cycling through.
Open to other people who might come in and say, hey, we could do this better, or how about doing this, or whatever the case may be.
That's a corporate governance fail right there.
Well, it is. And to your point, of course, the more voices you've got around the table that have different ways of thinking about things, the better.
Of course. You don't have to like what's put forward, but you do need to be open to thinking and doing things differently.
Oh, Oh yes, yes. But people hate change. You know, as a general proposition, change is confronting, and
probably requires more work. As a board member, it probably requires more time, and maybe as a director's liability, it's a little more unnerving.
Well, except a lot of change can be small but effective or incremental. It doesn't have to be sort of radical change to make differences. And I think, you know, certainly in governance, small changes can make big differences over time. But yeah, certainly having more people with more ideas, less groupthink, less this is the way we've always done it, is critical if we're going to proceed, and having more women involved is essential. And I just hope that the opportunities continue to open up. And I did talk about incremental before, but the pace of this probably needs to be a bit more than incremental.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got to have more coming through the pipe into leadership to get them there. So it's all a
and I guess it's interesting
connected pipeline.
In the US, they see a lot of directors coming through via CEO roles, senior executive roles. That's not necessarily the pipeline here.
As long as they're not going straight from CEO onto the board of the same company, because that's worst practice.
Oh yes, and I think that would be incredibly challenging to suddenly put aside.
Seen it happen.
Yes.
As an incoming CEO, that is just the worst scenario to find your predecessor now on the board.
Yes, and I can't get
second guessing everything that you do. Yeah, so that's so. Keeping on theme and wrapping up for today, Margot, but keeping on theme for Power of Women, what is the most significant challenge you think women are facing today in the professional world?
Oh.
Small question.
I'm probably not the best person to ask that question because I've always worked for myself. So I describe myself as unemployable.
Most entrepreneurs do.
Yes. So I
and that might be true. Who knows?
So I read about the travails of women in the workforce and leadership and whatever, and I've never worked. I have worked briefly for a couple of people, which determined for me absolutely that I'm unemployable. But it is just the juggling of the personalities, which I found the management of managing up and managing down depending on the circumstances you're in.
Takes a lot of time, that politics.
Yeah. Yes. And I'm an observer of this, so I can't really comment. But the rise of the focus on identity and on the individual rather than necessarily the team. I guess this comes right back to my rowing days. That if we didn't work as a team, we wouldn't succeed. So it's not a great answer, Di.
But you've pursued a self-employed career path, so different.
Yes.
However, I mean your focus on boards, you'll be dealing with people who've experienced that all the way through.
Well,
particularly
yes,
the females.
and even this morning I was having a conversation with a CEO who's incredibly frustrated about the way that her chair and board are behaving. So she's trying to, do her professional best, but a volunteer board in this instance.
Hard to manage a volunteer.
Yeah,
Tell
exactly.
a volunteer what to do.
Yes, well, it is very difficult, and I think that's a real challenge too, to be professional when people around you are not being professional. So yes,
I think the corporate world's full of that at the moment.
Yes, and so I think the overall challenges they probably haven't changed a lot from my sort of observations. Of course, there's change over time. Would be
Well, the product's human, so it's volatile and variable.
Indeed. Yeah. And so I think that there's still plenty of scope for women. And I think, look, it's not for me to give advice or whatever commentary to the women who are sort of up to their necks, as it were, in, as you described it, corporate politics and navigating their way through, in, out and surviving at the same time. And all I can say is I'm pretty glad I'm not one of them.
Yeah, but hats off to you of driving your own race.
Yes.
It's probably an alternative to putting up with all of the minutiae that goes on inside organisations as an employee trying to fight your way up the leadership ranks. So thank you. Thank you very much, Margot. Most insightful, and being this close to an Olympic Games, absolute pleasure to have an Olympian sitting on the other side of the table in the studio today. If you enjoyed the podcast, be sure to like it and share it. It helps us spread the word and get it out there. And you can follow the Power of Women podcast on the socials. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. I think we can probably follow you, Margot, on LinkedIn as well. Mm-hmm. And we'll put the link to your business into the show notes. And I've had a lot of fantastic inquiries coming through the Power of Women website suggesting potential guests, and there's quite a number of those coming through in the future episodes. So please keep reaching out, because that is amazing. That also tells me that you're watching and listening, and thank you for that. Until next time.